What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to talk about the earnings that just came out for today, break down big data that's coming out for tomorrow, what you should be watching for as time goes on. But just remember that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link. If you deposit any amount of money, you're guaranteed 12 free stocks. If you deposit $500 more, you're guaranteed 20, and deposit $2,000 more, and you're guaranteed 40. The offer ends very soon, in just about 10 hours from now. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the markets. We're looking at SPY right now. It's down almost 2% for the day, and the whole market took a big hit. This happened as a result of Microsoft's earnings, not to mention many other factors out there. We had weak earnings, not the best GDP numbers. And then also, even though PCE was very close to expectations, it was not really enough to trump this. And algos took over as the market was due for this little corrective phase. So as we're entering this phase, the question remains, is this going to develop into a much bigger correction, or are we about to see the market attempt to see a big bounce? I'll give you guys the answers to that in just a couple of minutes, but I first want to talk about some very important data. So to start off, I just remember that today was a very, very interesting day. We had tech leading the market down, and we had big giants like Microsoft, Apple, and Nvda all selling off. And the market saw a red day as a result of that. The majority of stocks ended up seeing some downside. Now, whether or not this downside continues big time depends on two main factors. Number one, the factors are earnings, and then number two is going to be the data coming out for tomorrow, at least for the short term. So for today, after the market closed, we got Amazon, Aapl, and Intel all announcing their earnings. And for tomorrow, we have a few, such as like Fubo TV, not to mention like Chevron and a few more, but everything's going to be very minor tomorrow. The main reaction is going to be coming tomorrow, though, to the earnings coming out for today. So right now we're getting Amazon and Aapl announcing earnings, the two big ones. We should be looking for a big reaction tomorrow once the market opens. So what's going on so far to these different companies? We're going to start off with Amazon. This is the good news. Amazon did relatively well, but Aapl was a little bit poor. Amazon started off with a nice pop because they beat on many of these different factors. Their EPS was a beat at $1.43 above expectations. Revenue is also a beat above expectations right over here. And Amazon Web Services data was very close to what we expected, whereas advertising was close as well. In cloud, despite the fact that revenue is a little bit below the estimate, it wasn't too bad whatsoever, as sales are up 19%. And then on top of this, despite the fact that their expenditures are surging, they're once again offsetting that with a lot more growth. So growth is projected to be quite decent for them, especially for the current quarter. We're looking at a revenue growth of between 7 to 11% year over year. And that is above, not really too far, but very, very close to what analysts are expecting. Despite that, it's still not bad whatsoever. Shares are still up quite a bit because we're looking at nice operating income, which offset a lot of the projections. And I would say that their overall guidance was not too bad. That's why the share price is up for Amazon. Investors are still very excited about this. Now, Apple is a different story, however. Now, Amazon's up like 5% in the after hours. Apple is currently down about a little bit under 1.5%. So why is Apple down? So this is another big factor worth mentioning. So Apple had their data that came out. Their EPS was a beat at $1.64 above expectations. Revenue was at $94.93 billion above expectations as well. iPhone revenue was above expectations at $46 billion, but everything else except for the gross margins was below. And that's something else I just wanted to call out. So Mac revenue was only at about $7.74 billion below expectations. iPad revenue at $6.95 billion, other products revenue at $9.04 billion, and services revenue at $24.97 billion. Everything was actually below estimations. Not the best of news, at least from that end. But what offset this is the fact that their margins were decent at 46.2%. That's why the share price ended up holding up despite this. So because they beat on earnings with some things in revenue not being as strong as what we expected, they overall were doing okay in the beginning. But what caused the dip was this. So during Tim Cook's speech, okay, he was talking about how for what we're expecting, their expectations, at least for the current quarter, are not as strong as what we basically wanted. So when it comes to their guidance, we're looking at single-digit growth. Okay, they announced this, low to single-digit growth, and that's not what a lot of these analysts were expecting. They're expecting like 7 to 11% growth. So the growth projections are a little bit below what analysts were expecting. And that's the not so good news about Apple. That's why Apple's dipping a bit. It's not really that big of a move. It's only down like 1%, so it's not that crazy, but it dipped a little bit because of that. So they beat on EPS and revenue. Most things were quite decent. Some of their revenue streams were not as strong as expected, and then their guidance was pretty good, but not as great as what analysts were expecting. That's why the share price ended up dipping a bit. So that's the story of Apple. So tomorrow, Amazon is going to help push different sectors like retail up. Amazon's going to help the market try to push up, but Apple's going to hold the market just a tiny bit down. It's not moving as much, so it's not going to be as impactful. But just know that Apple isn't doing as well. So just keep that in mind. Now, that's the first factor. That's earnings for you. The two main earnings were Apple and Amazon. The second factor is going to be the data coming out for tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be Friday, November 1st, 2024, the first day of November, the start of a new month. Okay, 1 hour before the market opens at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the non-farm payrolls and unemployment rate all coming out, not to mention very important unemployment numbers. So we're going to be looking at how the labor force participation rate looks, and then more numbers when it comes to non-farm payrolls and etc. So watch for all of this very, very carefully. But the main piece of data is going to be the unemployment data. If this is above expectations, above 4.3%, this could be very bearish for the markets, and this could cause the market to dump more. If this is aligned with expectations, which I think is very probable, it shouldn't be as bad, in my personal opinion. We also have some ISM manufacturing numbers at 10 o'clock a.m. That's going to cause even more volatility. So just remember, before the market opens, we have unemployment numbers, then manufacturing numbers at 10 a.m. That's when we're going to be looking for some volatility. So the first factor for the markets is, I would say, a tiny bit more bullish than bearish, because Amazon's up like 5%. Apple's down only 1%. So I think Amazon's a little bit more impactful because of that. So this could help the market rebound. And then we're just waiting to see what happens with the economic data tomorrow morning. So I'll be watching for that. For other factors involving the markets right now, fear is making up the majority of sentiment. Momentum is now decreasing as we're approaching fear. And as the S&P 500 gets closer to its 125 daily moving average, there's weakness building. The puts and call option ratio is at neutral, kind of stuck in the middle, not really doing a whole lot. Volatility is at fear is making up the majority of sentiment as the VIX is breaking out. And besides that, I'm not seeing anything else that's too significant. So right now, fear is back. The bears are back, and they are pretty strong right now. So what is my view of the market? What do I think is going to happen from this point on? And here's my honest assessment, okay? There are a lot of gaps to fill below. One gap is like right here. I don't think this is like fully filled on basically SPY. So I do think we're going to eventually come down to fill that gap. Just know that I personally think that there is more downside coming, but we may see an attempt to rebound after so much downside today. We're going to see an attempt to rebound tomorrow morning. It also depends on the unemployment numbers, but I'm presuming that shouldn't be too bad. So I think there is going to be a stronger possibility of us getting a little rebound in the morning period. But as the day goes on, there's no guarantee it's going to last. Okay, I'm being 100% honest about that because of this big red bar. Because when you look at the daily time frame on SPY, you guys could see that this is starting to shift. We actually closed very close to our 50 EMA on the daily time frame, but notice that we still have a lot of these gaps to fill in the daily, so I do think we will eventually target those. We look very weak on the daily, so look for a rebound attempt. If we make a lower high, we will continue to sink all the way down to the next level below. I also want to call out this. When you look at another confluence, okay, what else suggests that there could be more downside is this entire setup we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. The fact that SPY had a rising wedge, okay, we had this rising wedge over and over and over again. It was developing, and we actually broke out of it. So that tends to be very bearish. On top of that, there's a triple bearish divergence here, which tends to suggest there's more downside coming. So my view is very simple. If SPY is bearish, okay, you want to see it lose 568. If 568 fails us, I think that's very close to where the low is of the day. If that fails us, we're going to be dipping down to 566, potentially all the way down towards the gap fill around 565. And then if that fails us, we're looking for a bigger dump all the way down to where this imbalance is, taking us all the way down closer to like 560 flat. So there's going to be a much bigger dump if that level ends up failing us. So just keep that in mind, guys, to the low 560s. If we're bullish, you want to get back above 575, which I don't think we're going to do. I think what's going to happen is tomorrow morning, the most likely case is we rebound a bit. We're going to be looking for an attempt to get back above 570, maybe a little bit higher. My prediction could be off, though, depending on these unemployment numbers. By the way, I don't have these right now, so I'm just saying what technicals kind of suggest. An attempt to get back to this imbalance here around the 571 area could be coming. But I presume that because of the bearish momentum that's building, I don't think the move is going to last. I think that the market will temporarily try to rebound to the low 570s, consolidate between 571 to 572, and then we might be looking for another rejection and continuation lower to retest the lows of the day. I think the market has a very, very good chance of doing that because of how much bearish momentum there is, and because we're getting this big breakdown right now. So look for an attempt to bounce in the morning, a little rebound thanks to Amazon's earnings. Once again, my prediction could be off depending on these unemployment numbers coming out tomorrow morning. I just don't have the data to really talk about them. But I still presume this is the most likely move based off technicals, that we get a little rebound in the morning, but then we may continue to dip later on as the day progresses. Just to clarify, I see the same thing potentially happening to ES. So ES is basically what's leading SPY right now. Just know that this is more bearish technically speaking. But when we look at our very, very key support right here, if you just close this up, you guys could see we're trying to hold support right over here, which is where we had our 57.25 area. So if we rebound off of this, we're basically going to be looking for an attempt to get back up towards 57.68 and then 5,800 above that. I presume we're going to be pushing for about the 57.80 area, maybe very close to that. And then there could be a rejection after that. And the reason I say that is because when you zoom out all the way, let me show you something real quick, just like this. Hope you guys could see this. There's this big gap down here to fill. So I think we're going to be coming down to fill this gap all the way down to the 5600s. I think there's a bigger rug pull coming, and I think this is the start of a bigger correction. But we may attempt to rebound first. Look for a rebound tomorrow morning before we continue to start dumping down to fill this gap. So hope that's as clear as possible. We could be pushing closer to 5780 to 5800 before we see a rejection, so keep that in mind. As far as the notorious Nvda stock goes, okay, I think that Nvda also has more downside potential, but we're going to attempt to rebound as well on it. So we may attempt to push back up for 136 or so. The 136s, and if we break through that, we're looking for 138. If you reject off 136, we're going to be looking for a dip back down. I think what's going to happen is we push for the 136s, then we get a potential rejection back down. We could be dipping back down for like 132, not to mention a move all the way down here towards 128. So look for a rebound and then a rejection as the most likely cases, and then we'll see how things end up going from here. For Bitcoin, we basically have 69,665 as our support, and we have 70,100 as our resistance. My gut is telling me Bitcoin will attempt to rebound for 70,980 to about 71,000 into the low 71,000s. If we hold above that, we could rebound. If not, we're going to be looking for a rejection to move back down. So I presume there's going to be a rebound and then a rejection as the most likely cases. So watch to see if that ends up being the case. This level right here around 68,900 may be retested. So look for a pop and drop as the most likely case for Bitcoin, sorry. For Amazon, we look more bearish. I think that we're going to eventually continue this downtrend. I also want to mention that on the daily time frame for Tesla, we have this gap support down here. We have this big gap here, so be careful, guys, with Tesla. With the recessionary indicators and other factors like that, we're seeing Tesla really slowing down. So what I think is going to happen is this, okay? Tomorrow morning, we could attempt, it depends if we hold 250, we could attempt for 254 again. And if that fails us, we're looking for a move back down towards 246. And if that fails, we're going to be dumping all the way down to the 238 area. So I presume we're going to pop a little bit. And if Tesla cannot hold above 254, we're at risk of rejecting, coming back down to at least 246 or below. So keep that in mind. The same thing is basically developing. NQ is trying to rebound, so I do anticipate more upside. We could be approaching 20,200 by tomorrow, but I don't know if that's going to hold us. There should be a rebound attempt to get back up to the 20,200s or even higher, but then the movement will likely fail as time goes on, as we come down to fill this gap down here around the 19,000s. So look for some upside for 20,200 in the morning. We'll see if we break through that or not, but there is a risk of us eventually coming down later, so do not be too bullish. Do not be overly bullish. QQQ also has a gap to fill around 475. We may attempt to rebound for previous support becoming resistance around 488. It's possible we could go up there maybe a little higher. Then we could be dipping back down to lower levels as time goes on. For Aapl, we're looking more bearish. We could technically try to get back up to about 225. It's possible. It attempts to rebound just a little bit before it starts dipping lower. But I would say the share price is in a more bearish phase because of the fact that there's a lot of sellers. So it may take a while for us to get that recovery, and I think there's going to be a lot of shuffling in the 222 to 225 area. This is not going to impact the market as much. We're kind of flat. If it made a bigger move, we would have, but for now, I just see like a lot of sideways price action. Netflix is very choppy right now. It's not really doing a whole lot. I do see a risk of it dipping towards 750 though, and then it may continue to consolidate, so give that some time. For CELH, we're actually making lower highs like this. We're looking at this resistance around this 31 area, and we have support all the way down here around 29. We may pop to about 30.5 before we continue dipping towards 29. So watch to see if that ends up being the case. For Palantir, we have basically support around 40, not to mention 39, 39.25. I think that we could try to push back up for basically the 42 area, and we'll see if we get a rejection off that to start dipping lower, back down towards 40 flat. So look for basically 42 and then 40 below that, and give this the time it needs. For Supermicro, we're continuing to dump after the big news came out involving antitrust laws and factors like that. So with this potentially selling off even after AMD's earnings, there's no sign that it's done quite yet. We could continue all the way down to 28. The target I was basically looking at was down here around this 25 area, so I think we might be coming all the way down there. Looks more bearish to me. Rivian, I want to call out Rivian as well because I do see something very interesting here. We're below our key EMAs, so I think that we could be looking for essentially a move back down here towards the 9.8 area. So look for more downside potential. So far, it's just consolidating sideways for now. We might retest 10.97 and then just continue to trade sideways. It's not really doing much. I just see a lot of chop for the time being for it. With the IWM, we need to reclaim 221, otherwise we're at risk of dipping lower. So I do think we're going to be dipping back down for the 216 area. Yes, we could pop for 218.5 and then reject for 216. If we break 218.5, we're looking for 220, but I think we're going to be looking for 218 to 220, that range, then a rejection back down is the most likely case. For AMD, we look more bearish, continuing to fall right here off this head and shoulders like structure. We could retest 146 before we continue to dump all the way down towards the lower 140s. ARM has kind of like a double top like structure. We could retest 143.8 and reject and start dipping down for 140 and 138. For coin, we could retest basically 184 before it continues lower, but we have a gap to fill, which would take us down towards 178. So look for 182 to 184, then a rejection back down. Amazon's looking more bullish. Tomorrow it might try to hold up around 196. Could continue to push for at least 197.5 or above. And I think it's going to consolidate, so I see potential in that. Meta might try to bounce with Amazon. So we could be looking for basically 572, then a rejection back down later on. Keep in mind we have this gap down here to fill around the 540s. Might try to pop a bit before it continues to dip lower. There is a double bearish divergence here, so we're looking for 572 or so, then a rejection back down for 559 is the most likely cases. For Microsoft, still looks kind of bearish here. Might be looking for a retest of 412. 412 to 415 could be retested before it continues lower. This gap might fill down to 402. So look for a pop into the 410s before it starts dipping back down. Google looks more bearish. It depends on if 172 holds. If it does not hold, we're looking for 169. Still kind of weak on this trend, so this is why I'm saying it's kind of bearish looking. Might rebound a bit before it continues, but I'm looking for 168 as our target. DJT looks more bearish, still has not been able to get a rebound. Might retest 38 before it continues to dip, and then we're going to be looking for basically 32. The VIX is a little bit more bullish for now. As of right now, it's breaking out, and don't forget the VIX still has that gap to fill to 36s. So if we continue to break above 25, I do think we're going to fill this gap, which would suggest there's more downside coming for the broader markets. The 10-year is still shopping around. It's just waiting for the election. That's what's kind of like affecting it based off what the bonds traders are pricing in. And finally, the dollar remains bearish. We'll see if this gets a big bounce or not. It's not really affecting the market as it typically does, so I'm not really too worried about this. But with that being said, guys, I just want to say I really appreciate you guys so much for listening. The market looks bearish overall. We may see a temporary rebound thanks to Amazon leading the way up tomorrow. But just keep in mind there's an external factor, which is going to be the unemployment numbers, not to mention manufacturing numbers a little bit after market open tomorrow. So we'll see how those affect us. As of right now, this is what my view is. A little rebound should be coming. But then the move might not last, guys. There's a lot of bearish momentum building, so we'll see how things end up going. With that being said, thank you for listening. Have a good day, night, or evening. Have a very happy Halloween, guys. Enjoy the holiday. Do what you have to do, and I'll be back tomorrow morning for another update. I thank you again, and peace out.